Yo, it's Guido coming at you with the Tactics Talk. Welcome back and thanks for tuning in. I do appreciate the support of the channel. Today I've got another top 5 for you guys. This time the top 5 tanks that I think newcomers should go after when they start a new account. When you start a new account as part of the onboarding, there are missions Wargaming has set up. When you finish those missions, you will end up with a tier 6 tank for free. My recommendation is that you grind up one line and then you enter another line by grabbing that tier 6 free tank. So the 5 tanks that I'm going to recommend, 4 of them are tier 6s and one of them is a tier 5. I've got 2 heavy tanks, 2 medium tanks, and an SPG, and I'll explain the method to my madness as we go. So here we go with the top 5 tanks that Guido recommends you start with as a newcomer in World of Tanks. Alright, before we dig into the goodness of the actual tanks that I'm going to recommend, we're going to make a quick overview of the tech tree. A lot of these things could be entire 20-minute videos in and of themselves, but we're just going to do a quick broad brush look at it. I have the USSR line set up right here. There are 11 countries. Quickly, some of them are single or just a couple lines. You can see these ones down here. We've got Poland, we've got Sweden, we've got Italy, and Japan. They all have kind of one line through there, 2 lines, maybe 3. So the more complicated ones, such as the USSR, obviously you're going to start at tier 1 and you're going to move through. Because you're going to be doing the missions, you're going to move through the first probably about 5 tiers fairly quickly. Realize that I won't get into all the mechanics of it, but with blueprints and experience and bonuses and missions and things, you're going to move pretty quickly to tier 5. At tier 5 to tier 6, and then further on, it's going to become more grindy. You're just going to require more experience. That is, in a large part, a good thing because it will slow you down a bit and let you learn the game down at the lower tiers. This is why I'm going to recommend a tier 5, and I'll tell you which one it is and why. But take a look at this. MS1 splits into 2 lines. What you're going to really want to do here is look all the way over on the right side of the tech tree and figure out which tank it is that you want to get to. As you backtrack, then you'll know which tanks you've got to go through. The KV1, for example, will split off into 3 lines, which then split off into multiple other lines. The KV1 itself will unlock, it looks like, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and through the KV2, 6 different lines. You will find tanks like that down in the lower tiers on many of the nations that it is kind of a key tank, and that's the kind of area that I would go to, because once you get done with the KV1 and start unlocking other tanks, you have all kinds of options right there to look at. So that's what you're going to want to do. Take a look at the tech tree, see where it is that you want to go, and then identify some of those key tanks that you want to grind to, so that from there you now have choices to move on to multiple lines. Break. When you're done with the KV1 and you unlock one of these tanks, let's click on it. So you click on it, now you can see the tanks it goes to. Don't sell that tank immediately because you're going to want to unlock the other lines. That's the trick. So once you unlock the experience for, say, the T150, then you're going to want to keep on playing this and unlock the KV1S. So just a broad brush look at sort of some of the tactics, techniques, and procedures for going through the tech trees right there. All right. That being said, my first tank, the number 1 tank on my list of the top 5 tanks a newcomer should go for, is in fact the KV1. Did you like that little segue there? The KV1 sits in the tech tree on the Russian line right here in the middle and will unlock multiple very good tanks. The ST2, the double barrel tanks, the IS-4 heavily armored, the 705A heavily armored, IS-7 heavily armored, 3 separate Russian heavy tank lines. Oops, I missed one. 4 separate to include these faster versions of the T10 and 277, or faster versions of a heavy tank. That's a lot of goodness, and as a matter of fact, you can get the iconic KV2 off of the KV1 line, and you can in fact jump into a casemate TD line up here, so you don't have to just stick to heavies with the KV1. Very good tank for one of your first tanks. Solid tier 5. So let's get into the KV1. Number 1 is going to be the KV1. This is a tier 5, not a tier 6, but I highly recommend you grind through to tier 5 on this. You're not going to be able to obviously grab this one with the coin for the tier 6. So this would really, in my opinion, for a new player, be the first line you grind through from tier 1 up into during the missions and get yourself a KV1. Quickly back over the tech tree, you can see that it opens up a multitude of great tank lines. all of the Russian heavy tank lines, and through the KV2 you can actually jump into this casemate line up to the 268. So it unlocks a great number of good tanks. We're going to jump into the comparison tool because I want to show you something in there that's going to help you with understanding how you're going to grind your modules, because sometimes you can't do it in the direction or in the way that you would like to. All right, click on the comparison, go to compare, add your KV1, add to comparison, click on that and find the KV1 and add it in there. Click configure and then click here. I'm going to take off top configuration. We're going to click on one of these, and now we come into this little tool here, which is going to help you understand whether or not you can grind or add the module you want, because you want to add all these modules. However, sometimes you're going to need the tracks, because the tracks are going to increase your carry capability. We'll talk about it in a moment, but there's also some equipment that can help you out with this as well. But as a general rule, you're going to want to do it this way. You will notice that, say I want to put the first engine on. I decided the first thing I want to do is add an engine. Okay, that works. And then I want to add the other engine. That also seems to work. Say I want to add the turret. I'm going to hover my mouse over that. See down below where the tracks now have a dashed line around it? What that means is I can't have that turret without the tracks. As a general rule for all of these tanks, and there are some ways around it, but as a general rule, unlock the tracks first. You can use free experience for that if you want to, if you've got enough built up. I would recommend not playing stock tanks as much as possible. This is another video for another day. We can talk about that in another video later on, but as a general rule, try not to drive stock tanks. You're not going to be able to avoid that completely as a brand new player. That's a general rule. So this tool will help you understand what you have to unlock first. Top configuration, in my opinion, for the KV1 for the new player is the tracks, obviously the top engine, and the gun, and then worry potentially about the radio. The radios are not that important. You can have some radio range issues down at low tier. Once you get to tier 6, 7, 8, especially 8, the radios aren't going to matter too much. However, you are going to have to unlock it to elite the tank so that you are then able to put extra credits or extra experience onto your crew. All right, again, another video for another day. So if we look at this, get back out, and we jump into the tank itself again. We go into here. Oops, that's not what I want. I want to, here we go. All right, tech tree. And we look at the modules for this. You can see this is how I have it set up. The little check mark means that that module is on that tank. So I've got the top tracks, top engine, top radio, and top gun. Other things to think about, and we won't go over this in depth on the other tanks, is you have to go through some modules to get to the tank you're trying to get to. For the KV1S, you have to get through the top engine. For the 150, you could go to the tracks. You could play the KV1, everything else stock, gain the experience that you need for the T150, and go past it and move on. So there are multiple ways to do that. My recommendation for the new player with the KV1 is to unlock everything and play the heck out of this tank. It's going to do a couple things for you. All right, playing this tank at tier 5, you're going to learn the game. Very good. It is a forgiving tank, good armor, good gun. It unlocks a lot of different Russian tanks. And the longer you hang out at tier 5 learning the game, the better your experience past tier 5 or 6 is going to be. Now, I'm going to recommend you grab a tier 6 as well, but the same thing applies with the tier 6 that you pick. Hang out at tier 5 and 6 and play the heck out of the game. Obviously, grind up, get your experience. There's no reason to leave the KV1 or the tier 6s that I'm going to remind, or that I'm going to recommend to you in any hurry. There's no reason to leave them in any hurry, because rushing up to tier 10 is not going to make things better, I promise you. It's not. Rushing up to tier 10 is not going to make things better. Let's take a quick look at how I would recommend you set up your KV1. Your setup's going to include multiple things: your crew and your skills, your equipment, your ammo, and your consumables. Crew is over here, equipment is here, ammo in the middle, and consumables right there. As a general rule, you click on those and it will take you to those particular places. Let's take a quick look at the crew. The crew is a 5-crew system: a commander, a gunner, a driver, a radio man, and a loader. Lower tiers World of Tanks tanks tend to have separate radio operators. The higher tier tanks tend to take the radio operator position and add it to one of the other crew members. Very often the commander, but not always. That becomes problematic later on when you're moving crews. That is for a video for another time, unfortunately, and that could go on and on. But you are going to want to set up your crews, get them to 100% qualification in the tank. If you're buying 80% crews or less, then that's going to take some time. You should have some pretty good crews that have been working for you or working with you while you were going through the onboarding system and the missions for World of Tanks. So obviously keep those crews around and move them up through the tanks. Quickly look at some of the skills. We'll go ahead and get all of these guys unlocked here so we can take a look at them, and we'll start with Mr. Commander. If we click over here on skills, the skills you want for the commander right off the bat, and this is probably one of the most important ones, is going to be Sixth Sense. You should have a crew or two or a commander or two that you've got on the onboarding that has Sixth Sense. That's very good. Other important commander skills, we're going to go over this. I'm not going to get too in depth with this because this is really to taste. I'm just going to throw out some good ones for the commander. Sixth Sense. Brothers in Arms for all your crew. That's just a blanket statement. That's a bonus to the whole crew, but everyone in the crew has to have it at 100%. All right, as it is a perk. Perks require that they be at 100% to work. Skills will work at whatever percentage you're at, up to the max at 100%. All right. Other commander skills. Recon is probably the third one. Brothers in Arms, Sixth Sense, Brothers in Arms, Recon. Recon is going to increase your spotting range, your view range, and that is hugely important. I'm only going to talk about the top three for each of the crew members right now. Come over here, we've got the gunner. Taking a look at the skills. Brothers in Arms, once again. He is training right now Snapshot. That is number 2. Number 3 for the gunner is going to be a little bit to taste. I don't care for Designated Target, Armor, or Deadeye. I don't think they do that much. So while we have Snapshot and Brothers in Arms, because it's a heavy tank, I would take Repairs, which will help you fix tracks and modules and things faster. Heavy tanks are going to take damage. That is your gunner. For your driver, mine is currently training Smooth Ride. That would be number 1. Brothers in Arms, number 2. After that, you have a couple choices. Clutch braking is a pretty good one for tanks that are slow to turn. Big heavy tanks are slow to turn. That allows you to get the whole turn faster to help against being basically just driving around and turning, being circled by faster tanks, getting your whole turn to where you need to be. Clutch braking is a pretty good choice. Off-road driving, I think, is not as good as clutch braking, but it will help you in some of the soggier, bogged down kinds of ground. Again, big slow tanks, that could help out right there. And then I'm going to throw Repairs at you again here, and I'm sort of giving you a three-headed monster for number 3. It's really to taste, but Repairs is important for heavy tanks as well. Coming down here to the radio operator. The radio operator, whether it's on the commander or as a separate guy, has one very important skill that must be taken, in my opinion: situational awareness. This is another vision skill which increases your spotting distance. Absolutely crucial. So Brothers in Arms, situational awareness, ignore these 3. Never ever take Call for Vengeance, single boosting, or relaying unless you've run out of everything else. And then you're going to want to grab Repairs as number 2. So number 3. Brothers in Arms, situational awareness, Repairs. All right, and this is for radio operators that are standalone, separate radio operators. And now we're down to the loader. Brothers in Arms, safe stowage. It's a perk, has to be 100%. That's going to help you not get ammo racked. And then Repairs, which I am training on this particular guy here. That's the crew. Let's get into the equipment. All right, next we're going to get into the equipment. We're going to click on the equipment slot right there, and you can see all the different pieces and kinds of equipment you can put on the KV-1. It is a tier 5, so you will not have a bonus slot. We'll talk about that on the first tier 6, but it's usually the first slot right here. It will give you a bonus depending on what you put in it. Table that for the moment. Vents, rammer, IRM is what you're going to want on the KV-1. Vents, overall bonus for everything. Improved rotation is going to help you with turret traverse, vehicle traverse, and a negative to dispersion during vehicle movement, or actually a buff to the debuff. It's going to make it better, all right, while you're moving. There is an argument for improved hardening. This is the piece of equipment I was talking about earlier that you could put on instead of tracks and allow you to carry modules and other equipment without unlocking the tracks. I don't recommend that on the KV1, but there are ways around some of these limitations when you're upgrading stuff. Say you just don't want to stick around in a tank. You have to go through the tracks, or you have to go through, say, somewhere else. You don't necessarily have to get the tracks, but you don't want to be in that tank for very long. You might throw an improved hardening class 2 on it, grind through to the next tank, and then get rid of that tank. But this is not the situation here. The KV1 is definitely a keeper, especially for a new player. I don't see any of these other pieces of equipment being any better than those 3 for the KV1. Quickly into the ammo. This carries a lot of ammo. I would not bother with a whole bunch of HE, but it's not a bad HE round at Tier 5. There's a lot of very soft, lightly armored tanks at Tier 5, and an 85mm is a decent size at Tier 5. I'm carrying 56 armor piercing 16 APCR. These are what are called, they have various names: special rounds, premium rounds. Gold rounds is an older term. These are more costly rounds which will give you a benefit of some kind. Typically, the benefit is penetration. On some tanks, it's damage and penetration, or just damage. It depends. But most of them, your special round is either going to be APCR or heat. Most of the special rounds give you more pen, as is the case here. 120 penetration for the regular AP at only 109 silver per shot is increased to 161 penetration for 160 damage at 2,800 silver a shot. So you are going to be digging into your profits every time you hit the number 2, if that's what you've got set up for your special round, and it is the default position right here, and start shooting a special round downrange, APCR or heat. Okay, there is a difference between those two that's beyond this video. Again, another subject for another day. Just realize that the more of these you shoot downrange, the less money you're going to make. My breakout then is 56, 16, and 4. This allows me, with the special round, if I run into a Tier 7 and I'm having trouble penning it, I can hit 2 and have a much better chance with 161 pen. Notice that also the shell velocities will often change. In this case, it goes up for the APCR from 792 to a very comfortable 990. Anytime you're at 1,000 or higher shell velocity, it requires a lot less lead. It's just a more comfortable round to shoot out there. And you can see the HE is even slower at 792 right there. We're going to jump over to the consumables. My recommendation for new players is small kits and a large fire extinguisher, or automatic. Small for repair and first aid, and an automatic fire extinguisher. You may say, Guido, good Lord, that's 20,000 to buy that thing. The thing about it is it decreases the chance of a fire. So right off the bat, even though it's more expensive, you're going to have less fires, which are costly, both in the extinguisher and the stuff that burns. And that's when we get to the stuff that burns. If you get lit on fire, the automatic fire extinguisher will immediately put out, within 2 ticks, I think, the fire, and you're going to lose less modules, which cost money to fix. You're also going to lose less hit points, which cost money to fix, and you're going to have those hit points for the fight so that you have more votes in the fight later. You stay in the fight, you make more damage, you make more experience, you make more credits. Believe me, the cost-benefit analysis for an automatic fire extinguisher is well in the green for carrying the automatic fire extinguishers. If you really don't like that and just don't want to, then a manual fire extinguisher works. I do not recommend running food at your level if you're brand new, unless you have some free food that you got through missions and you just want to try it out. It does give you plus 10%. It's a great bonus. And when you get into a situation where you start to want to, do a little bit of the try hard, maybe increase your damage a game, you're starting to get a little better at the game, you have a favorite tank, you really just want to max it out, well then extra combat rations, or what we call food, which has different names for each nationality, might be something you want to use, especially if you have a bunch. In Depot, and you can see I've got 28 down at the bottom right, it shows there, so I could run food in my KV1 if I wanted. So that is the crew, equipment, ammunition, and consumables setup for the KV1. The second tank on my list is the German 3001P heavy tank at Tier 6. Bit of a sleeper on a list like this, but I really like this tank, and this tank will help you learn how to play the big square German box tanks. A really great tank. It's the Tiger of Tier 6, even though there are some premiums down there. I spent a lot of time in the previous tank on the KB1 talking about UI specifics and some of the things you can do to move around through the UI for what I'm showing you. From here on, we're just going to talk about the specific areas of this tank. So we're going to move on to the tech tree and upgrade system on the 3001P German Tier 6 heavy tank, the second tank on my list. You can see on the tech tree that it exists right here. It's an offshoot from the 3J. It's going to take you up to the Malchen, or you can split off to the Kampfpanzer 7. Honorable mention on this one goes to 3601 as another possibility, which will get you to the E100, another one of the famous endgame tanks in World of Tanks. And the split off is from the 3001H. I will tell you that this entire group right through here from tier 6 and 7, even down to this medium where you can jump off the 3001, these are all very good tanks, all very enjoyable at tier 5 to 6. But I'm hanging my hat on the 3001 because it'll get you to the Maus. The Maus, one of the most famous tanks in World of Tanks, and frankly one of the more famous tanks, one of the more famous research tanks, I guess you would put it, prototype tanks in the entire world. So 3001P is where you want to go. Let's take a look at the upgrades for this. For upgrading your 3001P, this one's a good one to show you how this works. Well, the KB1 was pretty straightforward and fairly easy to get where you wanted to be and understand that. On the 3001, in my opinion, this tier 7 gun, the 8.8 quick 36L56 with 220 alpha, which is fantastic at tier 7, and the best pen amongst the 3 guns that you can have. Look at this, you can put it on without any tracks. All right, my tank doesn't have any hardening or anything on it. I can actually get the gun first. So unlock that bad boy gun first, and then you're probably going to want to get the turret. Unfortunately, as you look at here, if you try to get the turret, then all of a sudden you're starting to need the tracks. So the next thing you want to do is grab the tracks, although honorable mention in this case goes to maybe upgrading the engines. You can actually put the engines on without the tracks. That'll help you with your mobility. I wouldn't worry about the radios right at the beginning, and then at some point you're going to want the turret. You're going to put the tracks on. Notice if I hover over this, I cannot put the turret on there without the tracks. Then you're going to go tracks, then you're going to go turret. I would not put either one of these guns on here. The 10.5 centimeter is a derp gun, low pen, high HE alpha, not that useful. The 7.5 is a faster firing gun with not as good, with a little bit better penetration at 150, but only 135 alpha. In my opinion, where this tank shines is the 8.8, basically a short 8.8 on that tank. And that is how you're going to want to go through there. We'll take a quick look back here in the tech tree on the tank itself and see what we have to do to get the next tank. Well, look at that. We have to go through the turret and at least this gun to get to the Tiger P. So I would not unlock the derp gun unless you wanted to elite the tank, and that can be saved for later. But if you're going to get to the Tiger P, you've got to go through these things right here. Notice just really quickly, just from a strategery standpoint, from a strategy standpoint, if I looked at this and said, I want to get to the Tiger P as fast as possible, you would try to unlock the turret and the gun, but you would not be able to put that turret on because you don't have the tracks to do so. So those are some of the things you have to take a look at. I will say one thing about this suggestion. The Tiger P is not a great tier 7 next tank. So that is going to be a little bit painful to get through to get to the next tanks, which are both quite good, especially to get to the Maus. I told you this was a bit of a sleeper suggestion right here, and it may be that the 3601 is the sleep or is the alternate that you're looking for on the German line. I just really think that getting to the Maus eventually and playing is a fantastic thing for a new player. But you're going to hang out at tier 6 like I suggested earlier. The 3001 is a monster at tier 6. For the crew skill discussion, since it's another heavy tank, go ahead and refer to what I talked about on the KV1. Let me just add one other thing for the new players when you're talking about skills. You will notice that this crew has Brothers in Arms first, and then I'm working on Sixth Sense. Generally, people will say get Sixth Sense forward, and this gets into whether you want to pay some gold to redo crews. The idea being that you pick a skill that will help you now, say something like repairs or the vision things, that kind of thing, because 6 cents requires you to be at 100%, and Brothers in Arms requires you to be at 100%. You pick something that helps you. When you get it to 100%, you spend some gold, you swap it over to a perk such as Brothers in Arms or 6 cents at 100%, and then you start once again on the skill that gives you something while you work it. This is probably one of the ways, if you're going to spend some money, that's going to keep your crews as good as you can get them. Realize, though, if you do that, you're losing 6 cents, which is why having a commander that has a free 6 cents is very nice, which you're going to have at least one of those. So you need to pick the tank that you want to put that person in, and you can get crew members later on as well in the game that allow you to do that. There's a lot of options right there. I just wanted to throw that out. You can tell then this is a fairly new crew, but I did go with the Brothers in Arms at 100%, and I'm working 6 cents. Last thing I'll try to mention on 6 cents for the new players, it is a great thing to have, but at tier 5 to 6, it is not 100% necessary. I know there's going to be some people who disagree with me, and note I said it's not 100% necessary. You're going to want to have it if you can get it, and in the future they may be giving it to every crew out there as well. So it's just something to think about on how you're strategizing going through your skills. I think if you're not planning on spending money, you just pick 6 cents on the first skill because it's the easiest one to grind. When it gets to 100%, you say, yay, I got 6 cents, and then you just start the next skill. My recommendation in that case would be Brothers in Arms as the second skill for all of your crew members. So pick something that's going to help you. As I talked about the KV1, second skill, pick Brothers in Arms, and that's for a free-to-play or a player who's not planning on doing a lot of gold spending to move skills around. All right? How you move skills around and things, that's once again another video for another time. So go with the heavy crew skills I talked about. As far as equipment goes, you will note that I actually have improved hardening on this tank. I said that I would probably not prioritize that for a lot of tanks, but I did enjoy it with this one. Also, once again, it will increase your carry capacity, so if you don't want to get the tracks and you do want to go turret first on this tank, then you would put some improved hardening on. I have vents in the bonus slot. We didn't talk bonus slot. At tier 6, there is one bonus slot. See the little symbol down there? That's letting you know that that particular item gets a bonus. And there are 4 categories up here. So we've got the 4 categories going across here. The vent counts for every category. All right, it is a bonus for every category. So no matter the category, and that's based on the class of the vehicle you have, no matter the category that it has, which is in this case survivability for heavy tanks, the vents will always give a bonus. All right, that's the cool thing about vents. So I almost always put them in the bonus slot. I have a rammer, so I will reload a little faster, and I am carrying hardening. If you don't want to go the hardening route on this tank, I once again recommend IRM, and that same discussion applies as we talked about on the KV1. For ammo, this tank has AP, APCR, and high explosive. You can see that its cost is 3,200. Interesting that it's less than a lot of other APCRs out there, but still costly. And that's going to give you another up to 194 penetration from 145 to 194. So I'm only carrying 8 rounds. If you're a new player, my recommendation on gold rounds, and we didn't talk about that on the KV1, is roughly 10%. And really for me, it's somewhere between 6 to 10 rounds. Somewhere between 6 to 10 rounds that I'll carry. So if I really need it, I'm bottom tier and I really just have to increase my pen a little bit, I'm in a sticky situation, I'll dab the number 2, I'll get more pen, and that will help me out. Once again, if I can pen and damage and get rid of tanks, that helps me survive. I get more credits, more experience later on. All right, even though it is more expensive. You do want to be careful though, and you don't want to just go full APCR loadout and spend all your money and end up losing money, because the point here at tier 5 and 6 is to make credits. Tier 5 and 6 is the sweet spot for making credits. Premium account and premium tanks are definitely helpful, but if you're going to go with tech tree tanks and you want to continue to make money, tier 5 and 6 is the place to do that, provided you can resist the temptation to press 2 a lot. That doesn't mean don't use it when you need it. Go ahead and do so, but resist the temptation to carry a whole bunch of that. Again, another video for another day, but just pressing 2 isn't going to make you a better player. It may help you in certain situations, but it's not magically going to make you better. Just remember that. Very good. So now let's go over to consumables. And once again, a tier 6, I'm carrying small kits and the automatic fire extinguisher as that discussion went. Looks like I was running a 6 cents directive. Why? Because if we go back here, you can tell that I don't have 6 cents at 100%. So that is one of the fixes for that whole discussion I talked about with your crew and not having 6 cents. If you have some extra directives laying around, you can go ahead and load those up, and for that game, you have 6 cents, and that's great. Yet another discussion for another video on how directives work right there. So that is going to be my load up, my crew, and third tank on my list. We're going to move into a couple mediums. The first one is going to be the famous T-34-85, probably the best version of the T-34 World War II wise, sporting a very interesting 3D camo with a flag on top, Karomovets or some such thing. I know I just massacred that pronunciation there, but this is a tier 6 Russian medium tank, and it is going to be number 3 on my list. Let's take a look at that tank. All right, looking at the tech tree, you can tell the 3045 sits right here on the tech tree, goes to the T43, the T44, and opens up 2 lines of Russian mediums. These at the higher level are called hover mediums, if you haven't heard that term before, but these are fantastic in World of Tanks, and the T-30-45 takes you to some of the very best mediums in the game without a doubt. T-54 is awesome, Object 430 and 430U, both very good. Even the Object 140 is pretty good. The T-44 is a very nice tier 8 medium. So other than the T-43, which is average, almost every other tank on this line is fantastic. And the 3485 itself at tier 6 is an amazing tier 6 medium tank with the 85mm. Very comfortable to play, pretty good armor, decent gun, just a really good all-rounder whose only real big weakness is going to be a little bit of gun depression on that tank. So let's take a look at how you might want to upgrade that. All right, your upgrade plan on the T-30-45, very interesting. You don't need the tracks, my friends. Look at this. We can actually click on everything we want. We'd like to get to this top end 85mm. Starts off with the 74, which is a little bit weak. I wouldn't worry about the derp, the 122 down below, but we'll take a look at what the route is going to be for you to get to the next tank, the T-43. I wouldn't bother with that unless you want to elite it. Same discussion as before. You're going to go through a intermediate 85mm. You're going to get the turret, then you're going to get the top 85mm right there, and that is your basic plan. Again, you're going to get the tracks eventually if you're going to elite it, but let's take a look at the route to the T-43, which may change a few things for you. Okay, your upgrade path is going to be through these 2 guns and then on to the T-43. Break. Now is a good time to discuss another interesting thing about the upgrades. On the T-30-45, you have this 85mm DST-85 BM. Well, guess what? When you go to the T-43, my friends, that exists over here. So there is an argument for unlocking things before you move on to the next tank that are used on the next tank, because then you don't have to unlock them again. And because I'm recommending you stay at tier 6, learn the game, I'm telling you to upgrade this thing all the way up to this really good 85mm D5T85 yada yada. And then when you get to the T-43, you will already have that great gun unlocked. That's one of the issues with the T-43. Its best gun is also the best gun for the T-30-45. Stats and reloads and things are a little different for the T-43 because it is up-tiered. Still the same gun right there. So you're going to want to go through these guns, through this gun, get the turret, get the best gun, and then work on the rest of this. Get your tracks, and I would go through the engines first to get the upgraded mobility, and then grab the tracks because you're not going to need the tracks on this particular tank. Eventually you can get the radios. Radios, by the way, tend to be some of the most common components that move up. If you unlock the radio right here, more than likely, and we'll just check it right here, 9RM or so, yes, it's exactly the same top radio for the T-43, and I would recommend you do that at lower tiers because you're going to be hanging out there getting a little better at the game, and then when you get to your tier 7 T-43, that thing will already be unlocked and you won't have to unlock it again. You'll just have to put it on the new tank. Crew skills for your mediums are going to be almost identical to your heavy tanks. If we take a look at the commander, come over here, you can see that I've got brothers in arms for all of these guys. I'm actually working my second one on recon. My recommendation to the newer player is to grab 6 cents. Again, you can use directives to bring your 6 cents along on each map, but you only have so many of those, and then you may start getting into buying them for either money or bonds, depending on how much it is. Again, another subject for another day. Make sure that your gunner, as discussed earlier, is getting skills such as snapshot. That would probably be his best number 1 skill, unless you're going to do the brothers in arms suggestion that I did, and then it would be your number 2 skill right there. Going into repairs next, because really designated target armor and Deadeye are not very useful. And then we get into the driver, and we are talking about snapshot, which is what I have taken right here, or sorry, smooth ride. Same discussion about brothers in arms and such. However, there are some other good driver skills, especially for mediums. Clutch braking is nice. Off-road driving is nice, because you're going to tend to take your mediums to a lot of different places on the map. Even controlled impact is an idea. Some of your heavier mediums, and they're nice and fast, can actually be pretty good ram tanks, but that's a fairly niche kind of thing. It just means that we have really opened up for the medium quite a few of these skills that are good. And of course, repairs. I didn't talk about concealment on heavies. Concealment can be a player on mediums as well, especially if they have pretty good concealment numbers. So some people will prioritize concealment maybe over repairs in order to use a little bit of the vision game. We get down to the radio operator, same discussion here. Just remember that the situational awareness skill is probably one of the most important ones, because that's vision, and especially for a medium. Much like a light tank, which we're not going to have on this list, but for a medium, vision skills are very important. So that should be the number 1 or 2 if you are taking brothers in arms as number 1. You can see I've got repairs, and then I'm working into camo. This guy has a lot more skills because he's a radio operator, and I've moved some crews around. Sometimes you're going to get that kind of situation going on. And into the loader is the same discussion as heavy tanks. You're going to want to go ahead and get your brothers in arms, get your repairs. There is an argument for safe stowage, because mediums will be taking hits because they do get into pretty heavy combat. They don't have as good of modules or armor as the heavies do. Safe stowage will help you stop from being ammo racked. So there's a good argument for that being the 2nd or 3rd skill as well right there. All right, let's take a look at equipment and the rest. All right, let's talk equipment for your T-34-85, and it looks pretty similar. We've got vents, we've got a rammer, we have an IRM. There is a piece of equipment called a vertical stabilizer. It is the best of the help your gun kinds of equipment, but generally tier 6s can't use it, so you won't see that till a little while later. I would prioritize the IRM as the 2nd best of those 2 things, and then we can have arguments about whether improved handling or enhanced gun lane drive is the 3rd/4th best, but don't even go there with the tanks that you're starting with right now. This is probably the best equipment setup. Notice that the vents are in the bonus slot, which is mobility for medium tanks, and it's a little swirly thing. I guess it's actually a RPM gauge of some kind right there. So there are some other mobility things like turbocharger that people might want to use that will give you a little bit more speed to get around. But as a generalist view for the new player, I would recommend vents, rammer, and IRM right there, with the off chance that you may want to play the vision game, meaning you might prioritize coated optics over an IRM potentially. In that case, that's going to allow you to see further. But for the new player, I recommend this solid setup right here. If we go over to the ammunition, I've got that 6 to 10, as I talked about earlier, APCR loadout. I am carrying, good time to discuss this a little bit, a few HE rounds along the way, and these are useful for resetting caps or taking out low damage tanks or penning lightly skinned tanks like light tanks or lightly skinned medium tanks. It is a little bit unreliable, even though it shows a very high average damage. You're not going to get that unless you get a pen, and when you're only running around, in this case with 44 pen, the likelihood of that is a lot less than you would like. 300 sounds good, but 44 millimeters isn't much penetration. Still, I carry 4 rounds around, and some tanks have really nice HE rounds. Just kind of watch them. If they look like they're high pen, carry a few of them around with you, and you may surprise a light tank somewhere along the way. Coming over to equipment, pretty standard here. In this case, I'm carrying large kits. I like the 3045. It's one of my kind of keeper tanks that I play every now and again. So I'm going large kits. Discussion on large kits is one of the benefits, much like the automatic fire extinguisher, which reduces the chance of a fire right off. they reduce the chance of things getting damaged or people getting hurt right off. That means you have less crit hits just by carrying one, but they are more expensive at 20,000 a whack, and that's how I'm doing that. I don't carry any directives. Again, a discussion for another day. There is nothing wrong with chucking any free directives you got out there onto your tank and using them up. Hoarding directives for some unknown reason is not necessarily a great thing. If you have a plan for how many directives you're going to use somewhere in the future, go for it. But my recommendation early on is use them, get the little bonuses that they add, and go on about your gaming life from there. All right, and that is the T-34-85 Tier 6 Russian medium tank, highly recommended to new players. This is one of the ones you should think about grabbing with your coin. Tier 6 free tank. Number 4, and we're going to go down to Italy and grab ourselves a P-43 BIS. Why the BIS, you might ask? Guido, why are you recommending an Italian tank to a new player? Because it opens up, in my opinion, one of, if not the best, tech tree auto loader line. The P-43 BIS Tier 6 Italian medium tank. The Italian line is pretty easy. You're going to Tier 6. From there you can actually split off to the Caro and the P-43. Bonus, you can either get the mediums or the heavy tanks. All of those things are auto loaders minus the Caro and the P-43 TR. So this is a good one to grab with your Tier 6 coin. The Italian line is not very filled out right now. Let's go ahead and take a look at strategeries, some strategies for upgrading the P-43. Well, we're back to a tank that's going to need tracks. You can put the engines on, you can put the radio on, but you cannot put the turret on without the tracks. Recommendation here is get the tracks first, leave these both basic, grab yourself a turret, grab yourself the best gun, and then work your engines, and then grab your radio. Let's take a look at how it goes through the flow to the next. You're going to unlock two tanks, like I said, the P-43 TR and the Caro. The Caro goes through the engines, the P-43 goes to the guns, but because I'm recommending that you unlock everything, you're eventually going to grab both of those tanks with this one Tier 6. Just fully upgrade the tank here and start working your experience to get your P-43 and your Caro P-88 unlocked. Crew discussions remain exactly as we talked about, with the addition that, and this is a good time to look at that your commander is your radio operator. Notice this is a 4-person setup. Commander, gunner, driver, loader. Pretty standard for the higher tiers. Nice that it's on the lower tiers. Wargaming started doing that with some of their newer lines. A lot less tanks with radio operators. The radio operator position, the skills exist on the commander. Mr. Buffon is the commander. He has your radio operator skills. What this will do, howsomever, is complicate the choices on your commander, because now you're putting a lot of pressure on your commander with a lot of very important skills, and three of the most important, let's call it 4. Sixth Sense, Brothers in Arms, and the 2 vision skills, situational awareness for the radio operator and recon for the commander, all exist on the commander spot. It's going to take 4 full skills with this commander before you get all of the very best 4 that you want right there. You're just going to have to deal with it, my friends. It is how it is set up. Let's talk equipment, and we're not really going to go very much further than we already talked about. You're going to want vents, you're going to want a rammer, you're going to want an IRM. Notice there is no vert stab here. I do not recommend improved hardening for mediums, as I've discussed earlier, and I would prioritize the IRM over the gun lane drive and the improved aiming. An argument potentially for a turbocharger, and the same argument for coated optics that I talked about with the 3045M, but this setup that you're seeing that I have here, I believe is the best for the new player. Let's jump into ammunition. 6 to 10, right? 6 to 10. APCR is your gold round. You're going to get up to 180 penetration, which is not a huge boost off of the 140, and I'm carrying a couple high explosive. Anywhere from 2 to 4 is going to be enough high explosive for most tanks that aren't pure HE damage tanks. I'm not recommending any of those. Well, not exactly, but we'll get to that in just a minute. As far as the consumables on this tank, you're going to run large kits and an automatic fire extinguisher, or if you want to save a little money, you're going to run small kits and a manual fire extinguisher. One thing I haven't talked about is potentially what you're going to run is what you have. So if you, excuse me, if you've earned a bunch of new or a bunch of small first aid kits for free, or even a bunch of large first aid kits or repair kits, then run the things that you have in your depot. That might require a little bit of fiddling early on in your career playing the game, but if it's free, it's free. Go ahead and use it up, and then you can worry about what you want to run later on when you're actually spending. Well, all right, my friends. The fifth tank, as you can see, is the M44. Probably one of the more cursed at tanks or hated tanks in the game. At Tier 6, easily the best Tier 6 SPG or artillery. Why am I recommending an artillery as possibly one of the first tanks you get at Tier 6 as a new player? Because artillery is going to teach you many things. It's going to teach you a lot about the maps. It's going to teach you about how to use artillery. It's going to teach you how to avoid artillery as well. Artillery is useful in a lot of missions. The M44 can actually do a large number of the campaign missions out there. Why am I not recommending a scout or a TD? Well, scouts are extremely hard to play, and TDs, in my opinion, are a very bad road for a brand new player to go down, because it's going to teach you to sit in a bush at the back. So I'm just going to leave those two off of my list. But you might say, well, Guido, an M44 will teach them how to be in a bush in the back. It does, except that you can use the top-down view, look all over the map, and learn all kinds of things about where arty can hit, where tanks can go, looking at the maps from top down, and plus all the missions. And oh, by the way, the M44 just prints ching cash all along. It doesn't even have a gold round to tempt you to fire. It is one of the cheapest tanks to play. It makes all kinds of credits. There's a lot of benefit to playing an M44, and I hate to say it, but it is true. So let's take a quick look on how you're going to set up and work through your M44. All of the arty lines are pretty straightforward. Once you get into the arty line, you're just going forward. There's very few that split out. You remember on the Soviet line, there was a way to go into the arty at one point through the KV2. I don't know, actually, to be honest, if it still exists. Let's just take a quick look over here. It does not, so you're going to split off from the Su-76 for that. So pretty much a stovepipe all the way up to the Tier 10 right there. My recommendation on the M44, you may not want to grab it with your coin, but you may want to quickly grind up the US line to the M44 so that you have an artillery to start working on missions with. Let's take a look at how you want to unlock the M44. M44 is very straightforward. Grab the gun, grab the engine, then the tracks, then the radio. There's nothing else to say. Now, if you just really had to get to the M12, you could go straight through the top gun and move on to the M12, but I really recommend you go through the gun, or you unlock everything on the M44 and you keep it, because like I said, it's going to print credits, it's going to teach you a lot about the game, it's going to allow you to do a lot of, especially the lower level campaign missions very easily, and you can move on to the M12 at any point that you want. Let's take a look at the setup. And for your skills on the M44, Sixth Sense is not quite as important on artillery as it would be in other tanks. You would like to have it, but you can prioritize other things. This particular SPG has 2 loaders. You will find that on quite a few of the SPGs out there. So it's commander, gunner, driver, 2 loaders, as opposed to the radio operator. And the radio operator position will exist on somebody else in there. So if we take a look at the commander, we're grabbing Brothers in Arms. Brothers in Arms is one of the best skills in the game, and I think it is very crucial for an SPG. I would get Brothers in Arms as soon as possible. The view range skills on SPGs are not as important. Now, you'll be hard-pressed to find something you want to get that's better, perhaps concealment, because you want to try to hide. However, take situation awareness pretty quickly. The radio operator is on the commander in this case. Let's talk about the gunner, because there is a skill you want to grab here, and that is right here, snapshot. That's going to help with the bloom as you shift your hull around and you shift your gun around. So that is good for a gunner. And then if we take a look at the driver, the same thing. Smooth right is pretty good, but I quite like clutch braking, because shifting the hull of an SPG is often very slow. So when you start to get circled, or you're trying to drive, or you're trying to shift your hull to get a shot, the faster you can do that, the better. Smooth right is also very good as well. You're not often moving around while you fire, but it will help you a little bit if you're trying to do TD mode or something like that. Concealment is always a player for an SPG. Just remember, when you fire, all that great concealment just goes away. So if you're running a camo net, that's all wonderful, but once you fire, all that stuff just goes away, and it's really easy to see you. Jump down here into the equipment. You can see that the special slot for an SPG is firepower. It's the little X right there. And I have my rammer in that spot. You will note that there are no vents for this tank because it's an open top tank. It doesn't have vents. So there you go. That's a bonus. That's a bit of a bummer you're not going to get. So I have a rammer to reload faster. I have an IRM. And this is a case where the GLD comes into effect because I have an extra slot for it on this tank. You could run a camo net. I wouldn't worry about it. You're going to be in a bush or in the back. At any point where the camo net becomes really important for you, the game's probably over already, or you're winning by miles and you're moving around for some reason. So I would really not prioritize a camo net. I would do anything I could to improve the gun accuracy on my SPGs or the reload. Some SPGs are closed and vents are a player on those, so you're going to want to use that as well. There's no decision to be made on the ammo, which is nice because it's fairly cheap at 505 silver. Just keep blapping it down range. And then consumables, repair kits. You'll notice I'm running cola. We haven't talked about food too much. I don't recommend this for new players because it's 20,000 credits just to run it. I'm running it because of a little bit of try-hard mode. You might want to put a fire extinguisher on there. There's other options as well. You could go with gasoline to move faster. Sometimes that may help the big, really heavy SPGs. This one's rather quick, to be quite honest, and doesn't really require anything like that. However, if you're going to maximize the SPG, then you're going to want to run cola, Brothers in Arms, and all those other kinds of things on there. But for the new player, just a couple small kits and even a manual fire extinguisher. Your SPG gets lit on fire, you're probably dead anyway because you're being shot, which means you're seen and you don't have a lot of hit points to last anyway. All right, so that is it. Let's wrap it up. Guido's top 5 tanks for new players. Well, all right, my friends, there it is, my top 5 tanks for new players as you're doing the onboarding. KV1 at tier 5, just a fantastic tier 5, really nice credit maker. Will teach you heavy tanks and opens up a bunch of the good Russian heavy tank lines, all very good. 3001P, bit of a sleeper, gets you to the Maus. Honorable mention to the 3601 if you want to go to the other heavy tanks. We'll teach you the box German heavy tank at tier 6. T-3485, one of the best tier 6 mediums, if not the best tier 6 tech tree medium, unlocks most of the good Russian medium tanks, and we'll teach you how to play medium tanks in a very forgiving medium tank and good one. P-43BIS, moving down to the Italian line, take you down to some of the lines that aren't as well traveled. This one opens up fantastic autoloaders, especially the medium line for the Italians. Also a good tank in its own right. That'll get you into some of the more unique gameplay items such as autoloaders. And then the M44, which is probably the best, if not the best, tier 6 SPG in the game. Credit printer, will do the missions, will teach you about artillery, how to both play it and avoid it. There you go. Let me know down below what you think of that top 5. I have no doubt that there are many of you who have a different opinion, so go ahead and fire it out, because much like the rest of this channel, as everyone who watches this video then looks at the comments, they may find out that there's another tank that fits their needs a little bit better that you have suggested down below. That is all I've got. Thanks for tuning in. Guido signing off. See ya.